Yeah, well, I'm still waiting for my call from the lawyer. I don't think she's going to call tonight. Her hearing must have ran overtime or something. I don't know. But anyway, it looks like I'm not going to work tomorrow. It looks like now we've moved the work day to Friday because we had a bad rainfall here earlier today and it just soaked everything. So it'd be really unpleasant to work tomorrow. So hopefully on Friday it'll be better and we'll be able to get some stuff done on that job. Um, anyway, like I say, I'm sure I'll hear from the lawyer at some point. We'll work it out. It's all right. You know, like I say, her hearing must have ran longer than she anticipated it running or something. But I was just talking to a friend on Facebook there about some things from the past, and I'm going to tell you this story. This is part of the reason that I have issues with authority figures and that I don't trust government, and that I see a lot of the time I see through things, especially where government is concerned. I see through things. I'm just sitting in the loaner truck now. I came back from Perth. I had another look through my truck in Perth there at the garage, trying to find that stupid butterfly. you know, I really don't know where it is. I think somebody must have lifted it out of the truck. That's the only thing that makes sense to me. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it'll turn up some weird place that I haven't thought of looking. But that's what I think anyway. I think it's been lifted out of the truck by somebody. Maybe when it was on the side of the road, broke down or whatever for 2 days outside of Brockville. Because I already had the thing in the truck at that time. I just don't know. I honestly couldn't tell you. I don't know. But I'm going to tell you the story, some of the story anyway, about my experiences in the Clark Institute in Toronto. When I was 8 years old, I was used as a guinea pig for medical experiments. When I was there, I was given massive doses of haloperidol that crippled me. I was given LSD twice. In fact, one of those times they even made educational films, black and white educational films, like the old fashioned with the actual film that you ran through a film projector and stuff. They'd be quite the collectibles now. This was 1976. Anyway, I was allowed to see those films after they were made. A nurse told me that I was a movie star, and she took me into a room with a film projector and a screen and some chairs and stuff, like a little movie theater type makeshift movie theater, and she let me watch them. And yeah, it was sad. Really, it was. Anyway, I had all that go on. I was molested by an orderly when I was there. He used to come and take me out of my bed at night. So um, there was that as well. Not something I talk about, really, but something that did happen. Um, I took seizures on the haloperidol, and it crippled me. And it also caused me to lose the ability to speak and the ability to know when I needed the toilet. I had to teach myself all that all over again once I got home, while I was being beaten and ridiculed and publicly humiliated because of that, because it was said that I was just being obstinate. I was putting on a show or whatever. That's what was said. So, I overcame all that. I overcame all that. But I'm going to tell you kind of a weird story, something that happened when I was there at the Clark Institute. Um, one day a man came up to the floor I was on, to the ward I was on. Never seen the guy before, have no idea who he was to this day. But he took me downstairs. He took me 2 or 3 floors down from where I was. And he brought me into a classroom. At least it looked like a classroom. It was made to look like a school classroom. And in there, there were rows of desks and everything. Like I say, it looked like a legitimate classroom. And there were two children about my age in there, a little boy and a little girl. I was 8 years old. I remember the little girl was kind of a cute little thing, really. I remember that. When I saw her, I thought she was cute. But I didn't know them. They were strangers to me. And the man said, okay, these are your friends. Play with them. And he left me there with them. Well, they weren't my friends. I didn't know them. I'd never seen them before. It was a really socially awkward moment. And I remember thinking, this is a weird situation. I don't understand this. This is just a weird situation. And I'm going to get to the bottom of it. I made up my mind I was going to figure it out. I'm going to do some sleuthing. I was going to be like Shaggy and Scooby, We're going to do some sleuthing. I was going to uncover the mystery. Well, I start looking around the room for things that were out of place. Was there anything here that will give me a clue as to what's going on? And what did I see but the blackboard? Now, you all know, if you remember a blackboard in a classroom, blackboards were made out of slate, which is a dull material. And it has to be, because chalk won't work on shiny black glass. Anyway, this chalkboard, though, was made out of shiny black glass. It was actually made out of welder's glass, is what it was made out of. I know that now. I didn't know it at the time. My dad welded for a living, actually. That was part of his job, and I used to see him weld, but my dad wouldn't use eye protection. His eyeballs used to be full of blood a lot of the time because the blood vessels would break from like welder's flash, it's called, and stuff. And he wouldn't use eye protection because he said he could do a better job without it. And they didn't force you back then at work or whatever. You weren't forced to, they didn't really enforce things the way they do now. Now all hell would bust loose if some guy in a job like that was welding without proper protection, But back then it was a different world, This is going back 50 years now, I'm talking about. Anyway, I'd never seen welder's glass before, but as a man I saw it, and I know now that that's what that blackboard was made out of. It was shiny black glass, and they had actually painted lines on it with white paint. It was fake as hell, and it stood out like a sore thumb. So, and there was a counter underneath the blackboard, which again, how are you going to write on a blackboard? You're going to be leaning over a freaking counter, trying to write on a blackboard. It was odd, and it stood out, and that's what I was looking for. I was looking for stuff that stood out. And I remember saying to the other two kids, don't you find this weird? This is strange. Do you not find this kind of strange? And they were kind of like, I don't know, maybe. And I said, well, I find it strange. And I said, I think that blackboard over there is the key to the whole thing. So I went over, I climbed up onto the counter, and I did this, shielded my eyes, and I looked. And what did I see? But I saw the shadow of a man on the other side of the glass looking back at me. So I motioned for the kids. Come here, like that. So they came over. I said, there's a man on the other side of the glass. I see him. I said, I just see a shadow, but I know he's there. And the little girl says, no. And I said, oh, yeah, there's a man on the other side of the glass. He's watching us. No. And I said, well, come on up and I'll show you. So I took her hand and I helped her up onto the counter. And I said, okay, just do that, look through the glass. Just look right there and you'll see him. Well, she did. And she looked and she just did that when she saw me. She said, oh, she said, there is a man back there. And she turned around, she said to the little boy, she seemed to know the little boy already. And she said to the little boy, yeah, there's a man, he's right, there's a man back there watching us. Well, at that moment, the door opened up and the man who brought me up there, he came in. He wasn't too happy. He took me back upstairs to the ward that he got me from. In the elevator on the way up, he gave me a backhander. Knocked me against the wall, and he said, you meddlesome little bastard. You've ruined everything. And anyway, took me back up there. Never saw the guy again. Don't know who he was. Don't know what his job was there. I don't know anything about him. But Anyway, other than that, he brought me down there and he brought me back after I ruined the experiment. And he called me a meddlesome little bastard, which is kind of a unique insult. I've been called a lot of things over the years, but meddlesome little bastard, I was only ever called that once. So it's, it stands out as a special kind of an insult anyway. But that's what he told me. He said, "You're a meddlesome little bastard," you know. Anyway, I do know that in the report that they wrote, I found this out years later, they said that I had a personality disorder because I had refused to play with my friends. And instead of playing with my friends, I had chosen to just to cause trouble and to investigate and look into things that were none of my business. And so I was labeled with they said that there was something not right about me because I did that. Anyway, yeah, that's just one story anyway. I've got a ton of them. But, what all that's done, though, over the years, having one experience after another like that, it's taught me that you can't count on any of these people. These people are no good. That's what it's taught me. And that's been proven out time and time again. That's been proven out. You can't count on the police. You can't count on the doctor. You can't count on the nurse. There may be individuals you can count on. I'm not saying that every single person is rotten to the core. But in general, if you're putting all your trust in the system, you're putting your money on a lame horse, basically. And you're going to lose. You cannot trust the system. The system will fuck you, and it'll do it over and over again until you learn that you can't trust the system. And anyway, I learned that early on. I had enough bad experiences that I learned that. And I learned the lesson well, too. Maybe I learned it a little too well. I don't know, but I did learn it. And anyway, that's just a few minutes of my life. Anyway, I guess that I had something I experienced when I was a kid in that place. It was quite a place. I watched them force feeding anorexic girls. That's a hell of a thing to see. Even as a grown man, I'd never want to see that again. That was horrible. But that's what they used to do, I watched, I'll just say it was bad anyway. There was a lot of things happened there that were very abusive, that were just wrong. That's all. But again, we're living in a fallen world and we're governed by a fallen system. And so we can't expect anything but that. When I was a kid, my dad used to have a saying. My dad's long dead now. He died when I was 20 years old in 1988 at the age of 51. I'm going to be 57 on July 1st of this year, just to give you an idea, a long time ago. But my dad had a saying. My dad had quite a few sayings. He had a way, he had his own language too. I kind of have my own language. He had his own language too. And he had some pretty neat old sayings, and I use them sometimes myself, because they fit a situation perfectly sometimes. And these days, it seems a lot of people aren't that creative anymore, so that it impresses people when I say these things. But I can't take credit for most of them. Most of them actually came from my dad or from other older people I knew when I was young. But this saying my dad had was, "What can you expect from a pig but a grunt?" And basically what he was saying is, pigs are going to pig. A pig is going to be a pig. What else can it be? What can you expect from a pig but a grunt? And so that's kind of how I look at this corrupt and fallen system. I don't expect very much from it. I don't expect good from it. If good comes from it, that's awesome, and occasionally that happens. But it happens almost despite the system rather than because of it. Every so often a little good will happen through the system. It's not all bad, but a lot of it is. Unfortunately, a lot of it is because we are living in a spiritually fallen world. And so we're governed by a corrupt system. And yeah, it just is what it is anyway. And there's a lot of people trapped in this system. A lot of the people that work within the system are really trapped within it. And so they may be doing shitty things to you, but they're in an impossible situation. They're trapped within that system, and if they don't do shitty things to you, they're going to have a hard time. There's going to be consequences for them if they don't. And so, they would sooner do whatever they need to do and rationalize it later and not have to absorb the consequences of not doing it, of following their conscience. And eventually their conscience gets seared, and the Bible talks about that, how if we engage in enough wrongdoing, our conscience will become seared, to become tough. And, we become hard-hearted then. And I see a lot of that in the world today, unfortunately. I see a lot of good too, though. I see a lot of good. I know a lot of really good people. Some of them even do work within the system. Some of them genuinely want to do right, and sometimes they do. Sometimes they do right. And I've even known people who did absorb the consequences for going against the system when they knew the system was wrong. Um, like I say, there's a lot of really good souls in the world. I mean, none of us is truly good, because we all have that bad within us. But if we were truly good, we wouldn't need Jesus. Obviously, we could do it on our own. We could save ourselves. But still, there's a lot of truly good people in the world as far as people go, and even within those systems there is. But the systems themselves are very corrupt, and it's unfortunate. It's going to be that way until Jesus comes back. We know that. We have to live with it in the meantime. I tend to avoid it as much as I can because I've just had enough. I'm at the point where I've just had enough. That's all. And so I don't want to deal with it if I can help it. And I'm at the point where I have a lot of anxiety if I have to deal with government people or whatever. That's one of the reasons that I'm going to be talking to this lawyer, because I need some help navigating this. I'm not smart enough on my own to deal with these people. And these people have the ability to really hurt me, and it may not even be that they want to, but it's just how it goes. It's the way the system works. So it may not be that they personally want to do that. Another saying that I remember from the 1980s, this wasn't one of my dad's sayings, but it's a saying we used to say. We used to say, yeah, but who is he at home? Who is he when he's at home? And what that meant is, who is he really? Because when you're at home, that's when you're the most yourself, And so somebody was saying, oh, yeah, well, this guy, he's done this and he's done that and he owns this and that and he's so smart and he's this or whatever. You'd say, well, yeah, but who is he when he's at home? In other words, yeah, but when he's not being watched by the world, who is he? What kind of a man is he really? And a lot of the time people put on a face in public, and they either seem better or worse than they really are. And if you really want to know them, visit them at their house, especially if you really get to be a friend where they feel comfortable around you and they invite you into their house and you see how they really live, then you will know that person. And then the question, yeah, but who is he when he's at home, will be answered. Anyway, that's it. I'm going to go back to Camp Crazy. I'm going to hang out with Rocky a bit. I always enjoy that. I know who Rocky is when he's at home, and Rocky's pretty darn awesome. I'll tell you that right now. Anyway, we'll see y'all later. All right? Bye for now.